a charming open smile, a bold and firm gaze, a memorable image. For millions of people, Ernesto Che Guevara became a symbol of revolution and the fight against dictatorship, the embodiment of the idea of freedom. He had an amazing charisma and magnetism, easily disposed people to himself, and was able to stand up for himself. When it comes to famous personalities, many tend to turn a blind eye to their shortcomings and vices. A halo of fame, courage and determination surrounded Che Guevara. However, like any man, the commander was not flawless. And, referring to the events of bygone days, we should not allow political propaganda to become a screen between the created image and the real person. Ernesto Che Guevara was born in Argentina in June 1928. He was the eldest of 5 children. His family was relatively well off and had strong sympathies for left-wing movements. Ernesto grew up disobedient. Already in childhood he had a tendency to cruelty. He tortured animals. And because of the fear of cold water, which could cause an asthma attack, he hated to wash. Because of this, the adult commander was characterized by carelessness in relation to personal hygiene, rarely washed, months without washing clothes. Carlos Figueroa, a friend of Che Guevara's youth, recalled an incident when during dinner Ernesto forced the maid to lie on the table to make love to her. When everyone was finished, Che Guevara, with a nonchalant face, continued his lunch. In 1947, the family moved to Buenos Aires and Ernesto enrolled at university, to study medicine. As a final-year student, he received an offer from his friend, Dr. Alberto Granado, to go on a trip to South America. In December 1951, Ernesto and Alberto set off on an old two-wheeled motorbike. They visited Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela. On the way the motorbike broke down, and the friends continued hitchhiking, sleeping wherever they could, in copper mines, in ruins. They earned money for food, they washed dishes, treated the sick, cured animals, repaired radios, worked as loaders and sailors. Got to know the life of the locals, socialized with colleagues. They even went to jail in Colombia, but were released. Granado remained in Venezuela, taking a job in a leprosy treatment facility. Guevara returned to take his final exams in August 1951. He received a diploma as a surgeon in the field of dermatology. For health reasons, he was exempted from military service. Ernesto traveled to Latin America for the second time in 1952. He met revolutionary-minded people, stayed in Mexico, and married a Peruvian revolutionary, Hilda. Here daughter Hilda too is born. He gets a job in the city hospital in the allergy department. In Mexico City, in 1955 Ernesto meets Raúl and Fidel Castro. At that moment, the brothers were preparing an armed expedition to Cuba, enlisting the support of Cuban emigrants. Ernesto also signed up as a doctor for the expedition. In November 1956, 82 members of the expedition sailed to Cuba on the yacht Granma. Only a week later, the Granma docked on the shores of the island of Freedom. Here the armed forces of the dictator Batista awaited the revolutionaries, and half of the members of the expedition were killed and captured. Next came the guerrilla warfare. More and more Cubans joined Fidel Castro's detachments. In January 1959, the Cuban Revolution was victorious. Che Guevara was promoted to the rank of commander and appointed commandant of the prison. Juanita, sister of the Castro brothers, who knew Che intimately, called him a man without a heart. In the town of Santiago de Cuba on the 12th of January 1959, he staged a demonstrative execution of 72 policemen, showing, "So will be with all those who served the old regime." On the commander's orders, more than 8,000 people were summarily executed in the La Cabana prison fortress. And at least 180 death sentences he personally carried out, taking pleasure in doing so. The number of revolutionary victims in the early years exceeded the number of victims of the Nazi regime in the first 6 years. In June 1959, Fidel Castro cancelled the free elections he had previously promised, and in September Che Guevara stepped down as commandant of La Cabana. Castro was grooming Che for important new posts. Che Guevara became head of the Department of Industry and head of the Bank of Cuba. Cuba was now ruled by a small circle of a select few. There were no representatives of other parties left in the government. Castro removed ministers from their posts, and many went into exile. As soon as the active phase of the Cuban Revolution was over, Che Guevara organized the work of the secret police. The enemies of free Cuba were found everywhere and then taken to an ambulance station. After torture, people were usually shot, with any reason other than the real reason written on the death certificate. The number of victims of the secret police is not known to this day. In 1960, on the Guanacabibes Peninsula, Che Guevara decided to establish a labor camp. Everyone who had the slightest suspicion of criticizing the communist regime was sent there. There was room for believers, homosexuals and rock and roll fans. Che carefully maintained the image of a guerrilla. He wore camouflage and always wore his famous beret. On his orders, a huge number of photos and videos were taken of Che sweating among ordinary people, working in a factory, laying bricks on a construction site, cutting cane on sugar plantations. In fact, Che loved luxury and knew how to enjoy it. He had a private marina, a huge swimming pool, 7 bathrooms and 5 televisions in the house. He lounged in bars, changed women frequently and wore a Rolex watch. He obtained Cuban citizenship and traveled abroad as an official. By 1960, Ernesto and Fidel had ideological differences and, citing that his work in the Cuban Revolution was done, he left the island to continue revolutionary work throughout the rest of Latin America. In April 1965, the Comandante decided to join the rebels of the Congo. In a short time a detachment of 150 men was formed from dark-skinned Cubans and immediately thrown into battle. Already in the first battle 4 Cubans fell. But the main problem for Che were the Congolese themselves. Out of 160 guerrillas 60 deserted before the operation began, and many did not fire a single shot. Things did not get any easier from there. The situation of Cuban instructors complicated by the fact that the local leaders went on the run, and the peasants every day treated them more hostile. On the 1st of November 1965, Che Guevara received orders to leave the Congo and return to Cuba. In 1966, he sent him to carry out revolutionary activities in Bolivia. Che intended to help the local rebels, but he chose the location of his base, a ravine in the mountains, very poorly, and also did not find support from the Bolivians. They were far from revolutionary ideas and did not understand what was wanted from them. In 1967, Ernesto, aged 39, was tracked down and captured in Bolivia. He was interrogated and then shot in a rural school building, ironically without trial, just as he himself had often practiced. It has not been established who ordered the execution. The Bolivian government probably made the decision. Already dead, Che's hands were cut off to identify his fingerprints. The body was first displayed to the press, then taken away and buried in a mass grave. Ernesto Che Guevara's remains were not found under the asphalted runway of the airfield at Valle Grande, Bolivia until 1997. At that time they were taken to Cuba and solemnly reburied there in a specially built mausoleum. Cuban propaganda did everything to elevate Che Guevara to a national hero after his death, and apparently they overdid it. Some Latin Americans began to honor Che as a saint, addressing him in prayers as San Ernesto de la Higuera. Cuban authorities decided to immortalize the revolutionary by depicting him on local pesos, and in schools on the island of Liberty, classes would not start without the song "We'll Be Like Che." The propaganda has done its job. The executioner Che has become a national hero, a role model. Do people who buy symbols with his image think about this?